Hey everybody, welcome back to Political Science 101, American Government and Politics at Simmons College. This will be the second to last video of the fall semester. And for those of you who have correctly noticed, that the supplement to the syllabus calls for a final exam on Monday, November 30th. Don't worry about that, because here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do one video now. A second video either very late tonight or tomorrow, and I'll send messages out through Canvas when both videos are posted. And on the second video, I will assign the final exam, and you'll have until Friday to complete that exam, to get that into me, and it won't be too complicated. It's one of those things, kind of like the 3 quizzes we've had so far, where if you've been paying attention to these videos, and certainly if you've been doing the reading, then you'll be okay. You'll be okay. So, with that being said, I want to talk to you all about a couple of things before the semester ends, and they are in your syllabus supplement. When I talk about being an American, what it means to be an American, the rights and civil liberties of the people living in these United States of America. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about a couple of different United States Supreme Court cases that were very, very horrible, bad, no good opinions that related to the rights and liberties of Americans, specifically American descendants of slaves. Well, one of the cases is about a descendant of slaves. The other case is about an actual slave. And then tomorrow's video, I'm going to talk about amendments to the Constitution. Certain amendments that give us, or supposedly guarantee us as Americans, certain rights. Rights that, if they are violated by the government, are illegal. Sorry, got a dog nipping at my heels here. Hey, buddy, say hi. Theodore. Doesn't matter. Come here, buddy. Okay. Now, with that being said, 2 cases I want you to know about, and you should assume that these will be on the final exam. The first is about a man named Dred Scott. Dred Scott was a slave. He was a slave in the 1850s, back when slavery was not only legal, but was a legal institution. In fact, one of the economic cornerstones of the American economy. He was taken on a trip by his owner from a slave state to a free state, and then back to the slave state. And let me be very clear. In those days, by the 1850s, there were very clearly defined slave states and free states. Some northern states, like New York, like Rhode Island, etc., had at one time allowed slavery, but by the 1850s, they did not. In fact, they adamantly opposed the expansion of slavery into the western parts of the United States. But not only were the southern states places where white human beings were allowed to own black human beings like property, but there were border states, states like Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. Those are not southern states per se, but they are states where slavery was not only legal, but protected by the law, protected by the state government and the federal government. Dred Scott went from one of those border states into a northern free state and then back to the slave state. And then he sued his owner. He sued the white man who legally owned him as property. He sued him for his freedom, saying that when he took me into that free state, I became a free man. And once I'm a free man, you cannot keep me as a slave. It was a creative legal argument. It was certainly, I'm not sure if it was a logical argument, because you're dealing with something in slavery that is so illogical, that is so irrational. The idea that one type of human being is inferior to another inherently. That is illogical, that is irrational, not to mention unethical and amoral. But that was the lawsuit. It's an interesting case. Interesting, horrifying Supreme Court opinion. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Justice Roger Taney, he wrote the opinion of the court, so the majority of the court, and he addressed a couple of things. First and foremost, he talked about whether or not Dred Scott had what lawyers call standing to sue. Standing means, does one person have the right to sue another person for whatever legal reason? It's a legal argument. It's not a factual argument. I'm not talking about facts, talking about law. Those are very different things. And it was a question of whether or not whether or not Dred Scott had standing to sue his owner. And Justice Taney said no, and he based it on a lot of state law and federal law precedent, so previous laws. And although that would have been a horrible opinion as it is, he actually went further. He kept going. So first he said, no, Dred Scott doesn't have the right to sue his owner, which again, that is problematic in and of itself. But he went on. He went on to say some pretty terrible things, and I'll see if I can try to paraphrase some of this and quote some of it as well. Justice Taney said that black people are not included and were not intended to be included under the word, quote-unquote, citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to citizens of the United States. On the contrary, black people were, at the time of America's founding, considered as a subordinate and inferior class of beings who had been subjugated by the dominant race. That's white people, obviously, according to Roger Taney, and whether, and back to quoting here, and whether emancipated or not, yet remained subject to their authority and had no rights or privileges. All right, so what he's saying there is that even a freed slave does not have the same rights as a white person. That's not okay. That's something that when Justice Taney wrote it, he thought that he was going to solve this controversy in the United States over slavery in 1857. He thought he was going to solve this once and for all with this powerfully, strongly worded judicial opinion. In fact, what he did was exacerbate the problem. He made the problem worse, much, much, much worse. It's things like this Supreme Court opinion, that inspired a lot of people in the northern states to take up arms and go to war and fight the southern states. 3 years after this Dred Scott versus Sanford Supreme Court opinion, 3 years after that, the United States erupted in civil war. A war that took the lives of 700,000 Americans, not just white Americans, but black Americans too. This is a bad Supreme Court opinion, but if you want to hear one that's maybe even worse when it comes to the rights of people living in this country. 3 decades later, in I believe it was 1896, you all know I'm bad with dates, 1896, there was a case, Plessy versus Ferguson. Homer Plessy was what southern state governments back then considered to be a black person, a descendant of slaves. We would now call ADOS, an American descendant of slaves. But he was 1/8 black. So for some people, he would pass as white. If you may be familiar with the phenomenon of passing, which is where a person of one race, for one reason or another, can appear to be a member of a different race. So Homer Plessy was 1/8 black. So I'm doing my math right. That means one of his great-grandparents? Yes, that's right. One of his great-grandparents would have been black. The other 7 would have been white. He lived in a time and place. The place was the American South, specifically New Orleans, Louisiana. And a time, the time that historians call the Gilded Age, in which slavery was illegal in the United States as a result of the Civil War and as a result of some constitutional amendments that we're going to talk about on the next video, the next and last video of the semester. But because of those amendments and because of the Civil War, slavery was illegal in this country. After the 1860s, it became illegal for one human being to exercise property rights over another human being. And what's very important to remember is that then in this country, not unlike today for some people in this country, there's a fundamental misunderstanding about the simple fact that people are people, that human beings are human beings. A black person is a human being, just like a white person. That is scientific fact. And to argue otherwise is inherently racist. But then, just like now, some people don't seem to understand that. And a majority of people, particularly a majority of elected officials and policymakers in the southern states in the 1890s, did not understand that simple fact. In fact, they believed the opposite of that. And even though slavery was illegal in the years after the Civil War, the southern states, through state governments and also local county and city governments, passed laws and regulations, passed statutes, ordinances, and regulations that created separate and discriminatory public services. Things like public education, public transportation, and a myriad of different services provided by government, state and local government, that were different for black people than they were for white people. Those governments ran almost entirely by white people who did not believe that black and white people were the same people and afforded the same rights under the Constitution. So, that is the world in which Homer Plessy lived. Again, he was 1/8 black, but that one fraction of black blood, black skin, and his heritage and his ancestry meant that he had to ride a different streetcar, a different car of public transportation than the white citizens of New Orleans, Louisiana. And so he sued. He sued, saying that the Constitution, which we'll discuss more tomorrow, the Constitution says that you have to treat all people the same, and I'm not being treated the same. The streetcar I ride on is inferior in a number of ways to the ones that the white people ride on. This is a public service. This is government discrimination, and it's wrong. It's illegal, and it's wrong. The Supreme Court disagreed. The Supreme Court established something that they said, I believe that was specifically equal but separate. You may have heard that phrase as separate but equal. The doctrine overturned almost 50 years later by Brown versus Board of Education. But in the 1890s, that became the law. The idea that a public service can be separate for black and white people so long as the service provided is of equal quality. Now, what kind of person sits on the Supreme Court, back then and now? Regardless of some opinions that I may have about current Supreme Court justices and some past Supreme Court justices, there are no stupid people on the court. Some of them, I think, have very stupid policy positions and have written some pretty bad opinions. But these are all people who are highly educated, who are highly intelligent, even if they believe, like Roger Taney, some asinine, backwards, racist things. There are no dummies on the Supreme Court. Then and now. And I don't believe, and I hope you don't believe, that the Supreme Court in 1896 was so naive as to think that the streetcar that Homer Plessy and other people who were descendants of slaves, that the streetcars they had to ride, think about it as like a TARC bus today, if you had segregated buses. The idea that they would be separate for the two races, but equal in quality, I don't think so. So a very, very bad opinion by the Supreme Court says, oh, the streetcars can be separate. In fact, all public services can be separate for the two races, segregated, as long as they're of equal quality. I think the Supreme Court knew good and well that all they were doing is making state and local governments put up bogus, phony evidence that one set of services was the same as the other. And of course, in reality, they weren't. Of course, they were not. But I want you to think about those cases. I want you to think about that as the background, what we're going to discuss in tomorrow's video. And in tomorrow's video, I will assign the final exam. It'll be due by the end of the week. I'm telling you, if you did well on the quizzes, you're going to do okay on the final. It won't be that hard as long as you've been watching these videos and reading your textbook. I want to thank you all for hanging out with me tonight. I want to thank you all for putting up with the background noise provided by my dog Theodore. And I hope you're all having a safe and happy holiday season. Sometime tomorrow, I will post the second of this series of videos of civil rights and liberties, and I will assign the final exam. Thank you all so much for a great semester so far, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.